Thanks very much, Ndluma. Thanks, Thorsten. It's great to be with all of you. Thank you for joining us bright and early here. And you know the topic as you come in the room, 20 breakthrough technologies that will define the 2020s. It started as a little joke, 20 technologies for the 2020s. And then I realized I only had half an hour. And so I thought, well, should I change that title? Because 20 seems like a lot to talk about. So I'm going to focus on four key categories, four key areas that I think are ripe for change right now. We're going to be looking at medical, travel, the office, and energy. To be honest, we could have done 50 because I think the 2020s are going to be a remarkable decade of change. But as it happens, I'm actually going to mention about 25 breakthrough technologies. And I say mention because obviously this is not an in-depth lecture on each of them. You're welcome, if you want to, during the Q&A session, to ask me to go deeper into any of them, or Google will be your friend. You probably have noticed already, I am not sharing slides. I'm in my slides. So if I haven't been spotlighted for you properly, or if I'm not quite in the frame, here's me in the middle of my frame. You might want to just roll over my name, click on the three dots, and then say pin or fit to frame or something to just make sure that I am full screen. Otherwise, strap in, let's do this thing. So the first major category is medical, and let's headline it with the concept of 100-year life. Here's a fact for you. Half of all the people who have ever turned 80 in the history of the world are still alive. Longevity in our lifetime has increased like never before in human history, and it will continue to go at pace over the next decade. So anybody who's alive during this decade is going to have to start the process, if they haven't done so already, of imagining what does your life look like if you're not aiming at that biblical, what's it, 70, that biblical sort of 80 years, but rather adding another 20 years on top of that. And this changes everything. It changes, should a bank give you a mortgage at age 70, a 20-year mortgage at age 70? Of course they should, if you're going to live to 100. Maybe that's a good time to buy a house. Now, how is this happening? Well, let's kick off, if you're counting along with me, here are your first three technologies. CRISPR is the technology that won the Nobel Prize last year. The two women who came up with, I can show off a little bit here, clustered regularly interspersed short palindromic repeats. That's what CRISPR stands for. And it's the understanding of how DNA works and our ability to actually get into DNA and edit little bits of the DNA. Yeah, that's big news, isn't it? Our ability to both sequence, well, actually more than both, sequence, understand, and now edit our DNA. Now, linked to that is messenger RNA. So we probably know mRNA most from the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines for COVID, because it is a way of delivering a new set of instructions to your DNA. Now, this is different from editing the DNA. Your DNA contains instructions. This needs the third one, which is stem cells. Your body produces cells. Think of them like Lego blocks, right? You've got a pile of 1,000 Lego blocks. You can make anything. You can make a house, a car, a spaceship, or a horse. And in your body produces stem cells, and then those stem cells get told what they should be. They can become hair, they can become skin, they can become part of your heart, they can become an eyeball. And we now know how stem cells work. We know how to send information to those stem cells to get them to turn into anything, and we can edit them afterwards. I mean, all of this is remarkable. And once we've dealt with COVID, the medical people I work with, a lot of my clients are in the pharma industry. They are going to, they are beyond excited about the ability to use these technologies to look into cures for cancer, dementia, Parkinson's, any genetic related disease. And honestly, that's what's ahead in the next 10 years. 10 years and 10 years and 10 years after that, we can't even imagine where we're going to be going. By the way, I can see the chat as we go along, so please feel free to throw questions into the chat. If the questions kind of match where I am in my story, I'll respond to them immediately. Otherwise, we'll keep them to the end. And for those of you who want to know what I'm doing in the background, I can show you that a little bit later. Now, my personal plan, I was born in 1970, and I am seriously, and this is not a joke, I seriously want to see the next century in, which means I'm going to have to live to 130. And I realize I'm not going to be able to do that with all original parts. And what we're seeing already at the moment is we're kind of augmenting our bodily functions with things like smart devices, like a smart watch that can help you keep healthy, right? That can help you keep engaged. But we're going to add to that within this next decade, exoskeletons. One of the biggest ways that we age is that we hunch and our organs get scrunched up, and that's got to do with your bones. And so if we can just stand more upright, and you just have an exoskeleton, a robotic exoskeleton to help you when your muscles start to fail, the rest of your body's organs can keep going for a long time. And just while we're here, if we're talking about putting things on our body, one of the things that's going to happen in the 2020s is our ability to actually read minds. Yes, I genuinely own one of these. It's a real-time EEG device that you put on your head, and it reads your brainwaves. Now, at the moment, it's not much more than a toy, and it can kind of just get vague ideas of brain patterns. But by the end of this decade, we'll be able to be reading fairly comprehensively brain patterns and functions in real time. And that allows a very different interface between us and machines. Now, if we're talking about longevity and living to 130 years, not everything is a technology advance. One of the things we're going to have to do is change what we eat and our eating habits. And we definitely, by the end of this decade, are going to be eating less meat. That's not just for health purposes. It's also because of the impact of animal farming on the planet. I mean, it is one of the most devastating things we do as humans, alongside plastic. If we can sort those two things out, we go a long way to fixing our planet. And so by the end of this decade, we're going to have proper meat alternatives. Now, this is clearly not a picture of how 3D printed meat actually gets printed. We're going to be eating meat, not meat alternatives from soya and so on, which I suppose are okay if you want to do that, but literally growing meat from stem cells. So if you go back to what a stem cell is, you take a cow stem cell, you replicate that, and you tell the stem cell to turn into a fillet. So we call it 3D printing. And again, if you're taking notes, keep getting on the list, because we can 3D print everything now, from houses to cars. 3D printing allows us to do remarkable things. We will be 3D printing foods and medicines. And I think within this decade, we will be printing 3D organic material. Again, that's not a representation of what the machine actually looks like. But if I'm going to live to 130, I'm going to have to do it with some replacement parts. Now, some of you are thinking, I really don't want to live that long, because you've got a picture in your head of the future. And your picture is, I don't want to be old. I don't want to look like those old people. What happens if this is what 100 looks like? And this is part of the job of a futurist, is not just to talk about the technologies that might impact us, but to help us reimagine what those technologies could actually do to people and to society. Because it isn't just a case of doing everything we've always done, but doing it slightly more efficiently, slightly faster, slightly cheaper, and sort of kind of just doing what we did, but just getting there faster. It literally changes the rules of the game. And if this is what 100 looks like, I'm all in. I don't want to be older longer. I want to be younger longer. Okay, if you're counting, we've already done 9 technologies, and we've talked about the big category of medical under the heading of 100-year life. Do you want to live to 100? Maybe make a comment in the chat box. Second category of breakthrough technologies in this decade is travel. And we know, of course, that driverless cars are coming. I mean, that's not news, that's already here. But I think that we can push ourselves even a little bit further beyond just driverless cars. This one's probably outside the bounds of 2020. So I'll just throw this in for free. If you're counting, don't add this to your list, because I think that what will happen by the end of 2020 is that driverless cars will be legal in most places in the world. But I think what will happen on top of driverless cars becoming legal is in many places around the world, they will become compulsory, probably by the end of the 2030s, maybe into the 2040s. But fairly quickly, we will live in a world where you no longer drive a car. Okay, like on most South African roads, you're not allowed to ride a horse, right? It's illegal. You just can't. I think that we will go the same to say you cannot drive a car here. You can drive a car for fun, maybe at a racetrack. But when every vehicle on the road is driverless, that's when you get the benefits. MIT did modeling and tell us that we are able to improve traffic flow. Remember traffic back in the day? But we're able to improve traffic flow by 76%. More importantly, improve safety by 96%. Why? Because every vehicle can tell every other vehicle what it's trying to do and come up with the perfect traffic pattern at the time. It's faster, it's safer, it's more efficient, it's the future. Compulsory driverless cars. What's more likely to happen in the 2020s is flying cars. Yes, this is in fact the decade when flying cars will come. This is the Dubai traffic police who already have flying cars. They're not cars, they're drones. I mean, we know the technology. The technology is drone technology, and at the moment this is in motorbike format. They have now put these into two-seaters. You can get two people in the air fairly easily in this way. Remarkable, isn't it? That's already in service in Dubai as the police fly over the top of the cars. Fantastic. What's also going to happen in terms of travel is what these crazy billionaires are doing. I mean, really, we live in a remarkable world when there are 3 billionaires, literally right as we speak, having a race to sort of get into space. They're not the first civilians in space. Mark Shuttleworth might come to mind when we think of that. But, you know, these guys literally in the next few weeks, all 3 of them will head out into space. And remarkable. Here's a video that was put together by SpaceX, which I actually think shows us what they're really trying to do. So part of what they're trying to do is go to Mars. I doubt that will happen in the 2020s, but probably in the 2030s, we'll see somebody on Mars. Old Elon Musk has said that he thinks that he will die on Mars. Hopefully just not on impact. Because of course, Mars is a one-way trip with current technology. You kind of can get there, but you can't get off. And there are a whole lot of people, including a few South Africans, who are amongst the first 100. It's called the Mars 100. Look them up. And they are the first 100 people who will head out towards the planet, the red planet. But I actually think that what these guys are trying to do, and the reason they're putting so much money into it is, yes, Mars is one of the things, but if you've been watching the video behind me, the technology that they all use, maybe Virgin Galactic slightly different, but Blue Origin and SpaceX use technology that's going to allow this. Can you see the timing here? Bangkok to Dubai, 27 minutes. Tokyo to Singapore, 29 minutes. London to Dubai, half an hour. Johannesburg to London, I think, is about 35 minutes. And genuinely, this technology is the technology they're using. So this technology exists to get anywhere on Earth in under an hour. And I think that's what they're really aiming to do. Add to that the fact that I think by the end of the 2020s, if you've got enough money and you're happy to spend it on this, you will be able to spend time in space. In other words, space tourism is on the cards. If we're talking tourism, do we really need to go anywhere at all? So the flip side of sort of traveling anywhere around the world in under an hour is, of course, virtual reality. and saying, well, we're going to get away from these, where is my headset here? Away from these clunky headsets that we use at the moment. Move to something slightly more elegant over the next few years, which will change the nature of physical space even more than COVID has. I mean, what happens if the future of the office is no office at all? Because the main thing that people are missing in the office is the physical interaction with other people. We're not missing rush hour traffic. We don't really need the infrastructure of the office. We've, some of you don't really have a home that's set up brilliantly for home working, but you can have a hub somewhere, you work at a coffee shop, but it's that physical interaction that we're missing with people, and virtual reality can give that to us. But even if we make this, even insert it into our glasses, Apple is probably going to be the next one to launch, or maybe Amazon will get there ahead of them. They're both working on incorporating VR into standard headsets, not even the Google Glass stuff from a few years ago. I think by the end of the decade, they'll have got it right to put it into contact lenses. And so we'll be able to have augmented, I think that's the better word, augmented reality actually with us whenever we want to. Switch it on, switch it off as you want to. So maybe the future of travel is not physically going somewhere, but being able to immerse yourself in it. And maybe the future of the office is not going to the office, but still being able to be in a space, not a physical space, but an augmented virtual reality space with other people. So if we're talking about the office, and I see there's a whole lot of questions going into the chat, I think I'm just going to leave them for 10, 15 minutes time when we get to chat. So please keep throwing questions into chat and we'll come back to all of those. Thorsten's watching the chat and we'll pick up any questions that you've got in a moment. But if we get to the third major category of breakthrough technologies, this one's not so much a technology, but I think the biggest mindset shift that COVID will leave us. So 10 years from now, when we're looking back and our Facebook reminds us of where you were 10 years ago in lockdown, we'll look back and we'll say, this is what COVID really did to the office. Let me take you on a little journey. If it doesn't matter where you work. So there's a big if there, because not everybody can work virtually. Not everybody can work from home. Not everybody has the luxury of flexibility. If you're the security guard in front of the head office, yeah, we could probably put an app on your phone and you can watch the security camera from home. But if somebody starts breaking in, you kind of have to be there, right? 24 hours production at a factory. Sure, we can replace you with robots. I'll come back to that in a second. But, you kind of got to be at the factory to do your job, at least the job as you know it now. So there's an if. But if you can work from anywhere, and there's flexibility in the geography of your work, then the big question has to be, why can't there be flexibility about the timing? In other words, if you're not going to the office, why should we be keeping office hours? If you get up at 5 in the morning and you give 2 hours of work to your company because the kids are not up yet and it's a great time to work, and you get, in that 2 hours, you might do 4 hours of actual work because the office was not an efficient place to work. I mean, we know this. 8 hours at the office was for some of you was 4 or 5 hours of actual work, whereas 5 hours of home might be 8 hours of actual work, if you see what I mean. So if we don't have to go to the office, we shouldn't really be keeping office hours. So we get a lot more flexibility in our system. And at that point, I think one of the biggest breakthroughs that's coming, and as I say, it's not a technology breakthrough as such, but I think it'll change the world, is the third thing you have to do is to say, if it doesn't matter where you work and it doesn't matter when you work, then does it matter how many hours you're working? And I think by the end of this decade, we will have stopped counting hours. It's called outcomes-based workplaces, OBW. And I think it's the biggest mindset shift that companies need to make, to stop counting hours. Who cares if you're happy with the work they're doing and they've given you the outputs you're asking of them, and it took them 4 hours, does it matter? You don't have to now fill another 4 hours of their time. Iceland has been experimenting, a grand experiment with tens of thousands of people on a 4-day work week. Surprise, surprise, it might not surprise you, it didn't surprise me. Those people who worked 4 days a week got more done than the people who worked 5 days a week because they were more focused. Think about when you take a half day at work, you actually get almost a full day's done because you're more focused. And we need to stop glorifying people who work long hours and start glorifying people who are smart and work less hours and give the outputs that they paid for. If you do that and you put all of this stuff together, you'll realize that within a few years, most of us are going to be working in global teams. Because if it doesn't matter where or when you work, well, then you can look for talent in every time zone. You don't have to live in the same city as your job. You don't even have to live in the same hemisphere as your job. And that, by the way, is great news for South Africans. We live in the most perfect time zone. We can do Asia in the morning and the Americas in the evening. Our English, if you speak English in South Africa, you've got one of the most understandable English accents on the planet. We're beautifully located for global work. I think this is going to be the story of the 2020s. Let's get back to technology. One of the things that's going to happen in the 2020s is real-time translation. It's already available in limited format where you can kind of just translate a website. You've got apps. Google Translate as an app on your phone is insane. You can point it to text and it will translate the text from whatever language into whatever language you want to, literally on your phone in real time. Check it out, all for free. And we'll have real-time voice translation. You can put a headphone into your ears and listen to this video. If you're watching us later, listen to us live. If you hear a TGIF with us now, and you can choose the language you want to hear me, and it's going to be remarkable. Last category, are you as breathless as I am? I hope so, is energy. I think that the 2020s is going to be a remarkable decade of advances in us using energy. And of course, we can immediately start with solar and wind and wave and renewable energies. But I don't think that's the big news. I think there are 3 pieces of big news here. The first is that if we get all of this right, not only will energy be clean and green, it will be cheap because we will have remarkable quantities of energy. Did you know that all of the world's power for every day, every 24 hours of power that the world needs is supplied in 8 minutes by the sun? So if we were just to put a decent amount of solar panels around the planet, we could get all the energy we needed for a day in 8 minutes. Now, that means we need better batteries. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things in energy at the moment, and better batteries are coming. By the way, I think that's another thing Tesla's working on. I think the cars that Tesla are making are the least interesting things about the company. I think that travel stuff and the batteries are way more important than anything else they're doing. We also have new forms of energy, and one of the most interesting one is tokamak generators, which is nuclear fusion. This is the good type of nuclear that only has heat as an outcome. There's no waste products from this. This is ITER. If you've never heard of it, go and check it out, iter.org, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor being built in the south of France near Marseille. And basically what it is a massive electromagnet that you pump raw materials into, and it turns that through nuclear fusion into heat with no byproducts. It's remarkable. What is this product that you pump in here? It's deuterium and tritium, which you might not have heard of, but is freely available in seawater. The fuel for this nuclear reactor in Marseille is seawater. And once you've built the machine, it basically runs at an operating cost of 0. Because you put tritium and deuterium, which is easily accessible from seawater, you pump that in, and it turns it into heat using the same technology as the sun. In other words, we've just built a star on Earth. Brilliant. And it will start operating in about 4 years' time. If we can make energy cheap, then we can make water. Water is easy to make. It's two hydrogens and an oxygen, H2O. The only reason we don't make, and hydrogen and oxygen is freely available in the atmosphere. The only reason we don't make water at the moment is it's too expensive to smush those atoms together. Not a technical term, smush. But we put those together and we create water. So if energy is cheap or even free, then we can make water. And then, of course, man, literally the sky's the limit with changes to farming, urban farming, vertical farming, hydroponics. And we can, if we loop back in our conversation, we can bring food supply into our cities, make everything local. It will change everything. Those are my 4 categories. And I think I've given you more than 20 technologies. Here's one extra bonus. If you've never heard of this thing, you won't believe it. It's called graphene. It's the new concrete. It's the new steel. It's what's going to dominate the rest of this century. Graphene was discovered about 10 years ago at the University of Manchester. It's a single layer of carbon, which, and you won't believe this, but it's true. It's 200 times stronger than steel. Yes, 200 times stronger than steel. If you want it to be, it can be flexible like rubber, up to 30% flex. If you want it to be, it can be transparent like glass, I think about 96% transparency. It's a 2-dimensional, so it's literally one carbon layer thick, which means it's lighter than air. 200 times stronger than steel, but lighter than air. It can conduct electricity and heat if you wanted to, and it can take, like silicon can, a binary configuration. In other words, it can be a smart material and take a coding attached to it. You can build buildings out of this thing that are lighter than the air inside the buildings. You can build planes and cars out of this that can be run by batteries. If you haven't heard of graphene, have a look at it. The only reason you haven't heard of it is it's a little bit too expensive to make at the moment, but they've pretty much been halving the cost of graphene every year since they discovered it. Right, if you have been counting, I think we're more than 20 now, so I've delivered. I've delivered on my 20 breakthroughs, but of course, if you gave me another 3 hours, I could keep going because we haven't even looked at cybersecurity and robotics and artificial intelligence and predictive data analytics. And, the list goes on and on and on. This really is going to be one of the most remarkable decades in human history. History will look back and put the 2020s on the par with the height of the Enlightenment, with the height of the Renaissance in terms of breakthrough technologies. Just before I talk about how maybe we should be responding to that as both humans and in the context of a TGI conversation as we respond as Christians, as believers, just so that I can catch my breath and you can. Let me just say that we need to be careful to think that technology will solve all of our problems and that every new technology will make every part of the world better and all of our lives better. And I'm just going to show you a quick video to prove the point. Have your finger near the volume control. I think I've got the volume balances right, but it might be slightly loud or slightly soft. Have a look at this.
Emma. 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 Emma.
Nouveau le trèfle maxiphone.
Just a little bit of fun, but leads us nicely into the final point I want to make, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Thank you. I've just had a chance to see some of the questions, and we'll pick some of those up and some of the comments. Thank you. But TGIF, for those of you who maybe don't attend or haven't attended in the past, was set up many, many years ago as a place where Christians and people of faith could come to just have conversations about the world and the world around us. Sort of no limits, anywhere you want to go, different speakers every week. But always with that question as to, so how should we respond? And I think and I'm a Christian. I'm trained as a Christian theologian up to master's level, and I am unashamedly a person of faith, progressive end of that faith spectrum, but nevertheless a person of faith. And for me, how I respond when I mean, this is what I do for a living. I live in the future. I try and anticipate change and help my clients to understand the implications and prepare for the future. And I think Christians are often seen as anti-science and anti-technology and anti-advance. You know, too often when something comes out, there's an immediate response from especially conservative Christians that almost feels a bit Bronze Age. It's almost as if, you know, one of the cave dwellers has just discovered fire and all the others are scared and kind of beat that one to death because they think that there's some magical voodoo involved. I mean, I think the latest example is people kind of linking COVID vaccines to the mark of the beast, 666. If you take your Bible so literally that you think the 666 mark is actually going to happen, then you don't have a choice. It gets on your forehead. And unless somebody's coming and tattooing a number on your forehead, that hasn't happened yet, right? If you see apocalyptic writing as being more imagery and metaphorical, well, then the vaccine's definitely not it. Right. Again, I'm now getting into the controversial part of the presentation, but I just think that too often Christians have been seen as reactionary and kind of almost Bronze Age in their response, anti-science. Let's get over that. If I can be spiritual, let's use the Lord's Prayer, which I think it's as good a translation to say, you know, our Father, our parent in heaven, hallowed be your name. Make your kingdom come. Make your will be done. It's an imperative in the Greek. And make it on earth as if it were heaven. I think that's the intention. When we talk about the future kingdom, the Bible doesn't talk about the future kingdom. It says the kingdom is already here. Jesus brought the kingdom. And, you know, and it says the kingdom is nigh. It doesn't mean the kingdom is near in time. It means the kingdom is near in space. You can reach out and touch it. It's already amongst us. And this world will not be destroyed in the future. This is heaven. It gets renewed. So anything that we can do to make improvements, anything that we can do to make earth a better place to live in is doing God's work. So the question is, how do we respond as Christians to advances? And as we've been talking about this morning, technology advances. Well, I think we've got to ask, is it an improvement? Okay, does it improve? And is it an improvement for everyone? And so for me, the second question you can ask is, does it include? So does it improve and does it include? Because it should be an advancement for everyone. Give you an example. If robotic automation comes in to all of our factories, that's an improvement in quality and safety and so on, but lots of people lose their jobs. So as Christians, we could stand against the robots, not because there's some mark of the beast or something about that, but because it is excluding people from the working environment. Or we could get involved to say, well, what are you going to do in response to people losing their jobs? Should we be producing a universal basic income? By the way, for those of you who are writing lists of technologies I'm mentioning, I'm still mentioning them. So we're going to get close to 30 by the time we get to Q&A in 2 minutes. Should we do a universal basic income? Should we do education of people? You know, should every company that puts a robot in place of people have to pay a tax on that robot, and we use that tax to educate other people? yes, as Christians, we should be asking moral questions. Is it right? Is it wrong? But I think the morality of technology actually moves to social justice. And we should be asking social justice questions. Is it improving the world for everyone? And is it including everyone in the advance? Surely as Christians, if nothing else, we would be the people who say, no one should get lost. No one should be, if you don't mind, left behind. Nobody should be excluded. We, above all, should be the group of people who are inviting all to come, for all to be involved, for all to be included in anything that advances and improves creation and the world that we live in. So that's how I approach it. And I look both, yes, I've been very upbeat and positive this morning. I know there are downsides and negatives to some of these things. And I know there's a lot else that we could have spoken about. We're going to go into the chat now. You can guide the rest of the conversation and go where you want to go. But I think that if we are seeing improvements and inclusion, then we as Christians should be supportive of science and get involved in delivering a wonderful future for our planet. If you'd like more information, if you'd like to see the work that I do, can I suggest you follow me on YouTube, LinkedIn? I put up stuff like this every day. Every Thursday, I put out a little news bulletin from the future. I call it Throw Forward Thursday, just for fun. It's all for free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. The YouTube videos and LinkedIn updates. So just follow me there. And by the way, if you would like a copy of all of the slides I've been using today, maybe just as a reminder, maybe so you can talk to other people about what you've heard, there they are. Again, all for free. So just go to gettalk.at/TGIF 9 July. I think, yeah. Yes, yeah, I got that right. I just suddenly, sorry, a moment where I thought, did I get the spelling right? TGIF 9 July. And I've put all the slides and in fact, a few extra videos for you to watch about the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, I'm done. Thorsten, let's go to Q&A.
Graeme, thank you so much. If you don't mind, what I'll do is I'll just keep you spotlighted because you have the more interesting background. Notice I didn't talk about the foreground, Graeme. Graeme, wow. So you can see the chat stream has been quite hectic.
Yes, I realized earlier.
I could give you the opportunity to pick up on any of them, but if I can just categorize, I think
go for it.
To me, they are the big questions around ethics. There was also a question around surveillance technologies, big brother. You didn't go too much into those. Then the question around aren't these just first world toys and egalitarianism? And you touched on that at the end with regard to is it inclusive? And I think also some things in the space of unintended consequences. So so if we're all going to be 130 years old, are we going to have enough space and resources on the planet? But pick up any of these.
Sure. Let's dive into some of those. So let's start with that last one because that goes back to the first category that we talked about medical advances and so on. So at the same time as a lot more people getting older, we are dramatically reducing family sizes. Just 50 years ago, the average family had 4 children, and 100 years ago, the average family had 7 children. Now today, the average family has 1.9 children globally. That's not in Africa, but Africa is following that pattern. So Africa is a little bit sort of behind the global trend. China's actually so far ahead of that trend. They're going back. You might have heard that 3 years ago, they reversed their one-child policy to allow people to have 2 children. And 3 weeks ago, they reversed that. And now you can have 3 children in China because they want more children. So when the most populous nation in the world says we are running out of children, you understand that the space issue is not an issue. And of course, we can solve that if we bring in urban farming and make urban life a better life. That will work for us. And that's going to be a great future for Africa. For those who say this is all just first world toys, no, absolutely it's not. That energy piece, that's not first world toys. We know the issue in South Africa and across Africa of energy. If we can solve the energy problem, we solve a hang of a lot of other problems in our society. And it's not only the availability of energy, but if energy is cheap and clean, we fix the planet, we solve the planet, we get rid of fossil fuels, which is one of the biggest things messing up the planet. If we shift to new types of farming and new technologies, I didn't go into some of the other details around farming, but that would solve a lot of Africa's problems. Those fixing of diseases, getting rid of malaria, and we are close to a malaria vaccine, will be one of the most significant things for Africa. So yeah, if I sounded like I was just talking first world toys, you know, we can literally, well, in 2 minutes there, I've given you all the examples of how we can link into that. And yeah, there are unintended consequences to all of this. I mean, in 35 minutes, you've got to make a choice about how you present things. And I chose the upbeat version. But for every single advance in technology, Einstein said, sorry, whenever anybody says Einstein said, you almost have to think, no, he didn't. But in this case, he actually did. Einstein said, you know, that the history of technological advance, I'm not sure I'm quoting him exactly, but the history of technological advance is humanity discovering better ways to kill each other. And he was specifically talking about nuclear weapons. You know, he said, I don't know how the Third World War will be fought, but I know that the Fourth World War will be with sticks and stones. Basically, he was joking. He knew that the Third World War would be a nuclear one, and that we'd destroy ourselves. So yeah, every new technology gives us an opportunity to use that technology for good or for evil. And that comes back to my final point. As Christians, we shouldn't be opposed to the technologies, which is often what we are at least accused of, and in some cases, what many Christians actually do just by default. Instead of doing that, we should be in favor of the positive use of technologies. And we should be leading the conversation about morals, ethics, and unintended consequences as we think through from a systems perspective. And I think what our contribution could be to society as people of faith and as Christians would be to take the long-term perspective and to take the inclusive perspective. And by that, I mean, we think of everybody. So if it's only good for just a few people, it's not good enough. And as I say, for me, too many Christians have bought into the exclusive vision. We are God's holy huddle, God's chosen few, and we are the lucky ones, and we need to keep ourselves pure and away from the evil hordes. That's a little bit of Walking Dead apocalyptic theology, I think, rather than the Bible. I think that the Bible, if it teaches us anything else, is this widening circle of inclusion. From a small family to a small tribe, to a small nation, to the kingdom of earth, to the ends of the world, to all creation proclaiming the glory of God. And I think that the story of God is about inclusion, and inclusion with diversity. So it's not inclusion so we all become the same. It's every nation, every tribe, every tongue in all of their diversity being included. And if we as Christians bring that perspective out of our faith tradition into through a social justice lens into society, I think we'll be making a remarkable contribution. Right, it's awesome. I've probably covered the ones you touched on. Have you had a chance to sort of have a look a little bit more at some questions, pull out one or two?
Okay, so pulling out one that's near the end of the chat stream was around about basically, I think somebody saying, I'm not so sure about my faith in humanity since COVID season. There's a case to be made that just because we have better technologies, that doesn't necessarily make us better people. Yeah. And one could, there's even a case to be made that our ability to create new technologies probably frequently outpaces our ability to manage them both just logistically, but also ethically. Do you want to comment in that space?
Okay, I was looking for an excuse to throw in a few more slides. So if you're looking at my screen, I want to just give you a little bit of theory. It's called the Gartner hype cycle. And it's super important. It comes from the company Gartner, and I think it's very valuable. And it isn't a roundabout way of answering the question, but I'll get there. So what happens is a new technology emerges, and the early adopters, the geeky nerds like me, who own their own home EEG machines, we get all excited, right? We hype the thing up very, very quickly. It gets massive visibility, and it gets to this peak of inflated expectations. Bitcoin. Then it doesn't deliver. And or we see the negative side, because there's always a negative side, right? There's always the unintended consequences, or, as whoever asked that question, the people deliberately using it for evil, and for bad things. And we get to, I love this, the trough of disillusionment. Anyway, whoever came up with this stuff must have read Pilgrim's Progress. I mean, this is like beyond like hyperbole. Then what happens is a few people then step in, not the original nerds. I mean, if you know the WeWork story, you get rid of the crazy founder. It's also the Tesla story. You get rid of the crazy founder who kind of needs to be a bit crazy to get the thing going. But now you need what Richard Branson calls the suits. Okay, these are the business people. These are the guys that say, no, hang on, there is something in this product. We can do something with it. And they then get to the plateau of productivity. That's horrible. It's not a bad thing. This is the space where you're selling a product, you're making money, it's impacting society. So it's not really a plateau. It's just, hey, this thing is usable. Good example is Google Glass. Anyone remember Google Glass 2013? 2014, there's me being all nerdy in 2014, being the first person I knew to actually have Google Glass. Very, very nerdy. And then we all thought, okay, start to use it for evil. You go into a pub, you can do facial recognition on people, who, and there were some creepy things that people were doing. So it was banned in Seattle, across the city, and so on. And now, as I said earlier, we realize if you combine Google Glass with virtual reality, you open up all sorts of things for travel and tourism and so on. So if you just want to finish the MBA lesson very, very quickly, the business link to this, that's a little bit small. Can you see that? The biggest problems is adopting something too early. So you get into the technology too early and it's not ready yet for the market. The second problem you have is giving up too soon. So you're in this thing and you think, well, nobody's interested. The third mistake is adopting too late, because now it's already on its way up and everybody's doing it. And then the last mistake that you can make is to hang on too long. Okay, so there's a little bit of theory, but it's valuable because a lot of what probably half of what I've said today is probably in the hype phase. And almost nothing I've said today is in the plateau of productivity. And some of that stuff has to go through the disillusionment, has to go through that trough of working out what the unintended consequences are and noticing how people can use it badly. I think social media is in the trough of disillusionment right now. There's so much good that can come from connecting us to family and friends, connecting us to the world. But YouTube is a perpetual Nazi machine. I mean, it literally, within 3 clicks, its algorithm leads you to some wacky way out, and it's always right-wing fascist propaganda. If you follow the YouTube algorithm, it invariably heads you in that direction. I posted something about that on Facebook just yesterday if you want to have a look at the research. And we've got to. So we're right in the middle of a conversation about freedom of speech and regulation and what's good for us. And social media is going to look very different by the end of the decade because of that, because we've now seen the unintended consequences of giving everybody unfettered access to everything, of removing editors and publishers from the system so everybody self-publishes. There's huge advantages in doing that, and yet on the other hand, huge downsides. By the way, if you want to study the future, you should probably read something about the past, because 500 years ago, exactly the same thing happened with the printing press. Within a decade of the printing press being invented by Gutenberg, at least the European version of it, the Catholics and the Protestants were using those printing presses for mass propaganda. And Luther did a fantastic job of basically a mini genocide of Jews on the basis of pamphlets that he printed. You know, so even the best people can get it wrong if they misuse new technologies. Long answer, but I hope it was an answer to the question that was asked, Dawson.
Graeme, yes, I think you skirted the yes, but does it make us into better people bit a little bit? But we'll
okay. No, that's fine. I can give a much shorter answer to that. That's up to us, not the technology. And again, I think that as Christians, that's a message that we can bring to the world. That if we don't put effort and energy, now this isn't a theological way of stating it, but I hope that you'll understand why I phrase it this way. If we don't put effort and energy into it, we are more likely to do something bad than something good. And it is required of us as Christians to put effort and energy into doing the things that are right, into fighting against the bad, the evil, the wrong, in ourselves, in the world. And so it's not the technology that is right or wrong, good or bad. It's us and how we use it. And we need to constantly, again, my message is don't fight the technology, fight to make the use of the technology good. That's my answer.
And to follow on from that, and you're reasonably optimistic about that battle, right? So us is the best of us and the worst of us. Sometimes at loggerheads with each other. So we have virus and antivirus, and we have intelligence and counterintelligence. You seem pretty upbeat about the fact that the good guys will come through.
Yes, I believe that in the end, good wins, and I think good doesn't just win when the end comes and then good prevails after the end. I think, to go back to what I said, I genuinely believe that the Lord's Prayer can be at the heart of our theology. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Make your kingdom come. Make your will be done. Make earth as if it were heaven. I think those are imperatives. I think those are present tense things that we need to be doing. I don't believe the theology at all that the world just gets worse and worse and worse and worse until it collapses in on itself, and then God comes back and restores everything, destroys all evil, and the pure in heart survive. I believe that it is our task, and I believe that history shows us that we're kind of getting this right. We take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. We get rid of slavery, and then we still keep black black people under a yoke and there's still racism. And then we remove apartheid, but we don't deal with the legacy of racism. And then we start to deal with the legacy of racism and the legacy of misogyny. And we take 3 steps forward, and then there's a 2 steps back. But I think that, to quote Martin Luther King, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And that's my theological paradigm. And I think that we are invited to be part of that, to be part of making it on earth as if it were heaven. And I think we can. And I think we join God. I think that's what God is doing in the world. God is not sitting back and letting evil flourish. God is actively, Jesus has come and he has died already. And his victory is already secure, and we live in that. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back towards the kingdom being here. There's a bit of theology. There's a bit of theology to it.
Thank you. And a huge thank you just for your very encouraging look into the future and our role in it and our responsibility in it and our ability and also mandate to help shape that. I almost feel I need to apologize. I've sort of essentially monopolized the interaction with Graeme, perhaps just out of being a little bit overwhelmed with a huge stream of chats coming through. I hope I distilled them well. I hope I served you well in terms of what I threw at Graeme, and certainly I think Graeme served you well in terms of how he answered. So Graeme, a huge thank you to you.